The company that owned the missing submersible believes all 5 passengers are dead after the US Coast Guard said there'd been a catastrophic implosion.
Brussels says that Ukraine meets 2 of the criteria needed to join the EU, but must still complete 5 more.
International political and business leaders discuss reforms in the global financial system in Paris to better tackle climate and poverty challenges.
The UK faces recession fears as interest rates rise and Turkey nearly doubles its cost of borrowing.
OceanGate, the company that operates the missing Titan submarine, says it believes the 5 people on board are now dead. The US Coast Guard told a press conference that there'd been a catastrophic implosion, and on Thursday, debris it said was from the missing vessel was found near the Titanic wreck. The submersible disappeared on Sunday without a trace, and since then a huge rescue operation has been going on involving several countries. But OceanGate has now issued a statement saying it believes its CEO, Stockton Rush, and the other 4 passengers that included a father and son are dead. The company said its hearts are with the 5 souls and every member of their families during this tragic time, adding that it grieves for the loss of life and joy they brought to everyone they knew. A court in Moscow has rejected an appeal by Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and upheld an earlier ruling that he must remain in custody until late August. The 31-year-old US citizen was arrested on espionage charges in March while on a reporting trip. Last month, the court agreed to keep him in custody until August 30th. Defence lawyers challenged the decision at Thursday's hearing, but the Moscow City Court rejected the appeal. Gershkovich and his employer have denied the spying charges. The US government says he's been wrongfully detained and is demanding his immediate release.
I've had a long history with the Russian government. As a member of Congress, I visited Moscow. As UN ambassador, we dealt with a lot of issues with Russia.
Once a prominent political figure, Bill Richardson now works in the shadows, operating behind the scenes in the murky world of prisoner releases.
We play a role as private citizens in a foundation in pushing both sides to advance humanitarian issues like prisoner exchanges.
He works with the US government to secure the release of US nationals detained abroad. And since February 2022, much of his focus has been on Russia. Some of his cases are extremely high profile.
We participated in the Brittany Griner and the Victor Bout. There are other cases in Russia of Americans that we're participating with and having a dialogue with members of the Russian Federation. We also had worked on Paul Whelan's case in the past, in the Trump administration.
But there are others whose identities he prefers not to disclose. So how does he do it? His work as U.S. Energy Secretary gave him access to some of the top Russian circles, and the rest, he says, comes down to diplomacy. Both Moscow and Washington are working behind the scenes to free their citizens. While overt diplomatic ties between the West and Russia have ground to a standstill following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, this little-known-about side of relations is still up and running for now. For Richardson, more is needed.
The U.S. government has their strategy, and I'm not interfering in that, especially with the Wall Street Journal reporter. But the strategy is basically dialogue. And, you know, what the Russians want in exchange are Russian prisoners.
Although he freely admits relations are very icy, right now he's holding out hope for 2 other detainees he's working to free.
The negotiations are maybe going a little slow, but we're still talking, and that's positive.
Ukraine still has a lot of work to do on its path towards the European Union, even if progress has been made. According to the European Commission, the country has completed 2 of the 7 conditions that are needed to open accession negotiations. But advances are still needed on 5 chapters, including the fight against corruption and money laundering. And there's also work to do to guarantee the rights of minorities and to reduce the power of oligarchs.
Reaching out and inviting me. Ukraine now needs to build a credible track record of prosecutions and convictions and to ensure a steady fight against corruption. For this, Ukraine should take further systemic measures, in particular restoring the e-asset declaration system and implementing the adopted anti-corruption state programme.
The Commissioner for Enlargement updated EU ministers on the situation during a meeting in Sweden, where he also spoke about the 2 areas where Ukraine has already delivered. That is, the reform of 2 judiciary bodies and the adoption of legislation to guarantee media freedom. The European Union declared Ukraine as a candidate country last year, but must still decide if and when to open negotiations, a step that could be taken in December if the 7 criteria are met by then.
As Ukraine's counteroffensive grinds on, Moscow has accused Kiev of bombing a vital bridge in occupied Crimea with a British-made missile. There were no casualties, but the structure was badly damaged. Ukraine hasn't confirmed it was responsible. It comes as Kiev acknowledges making slow progress in operations to drive Russian forces out of Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia. They've retaken several villages, including this one, Storozhev, but each victory is hard-fought with significant losses. With this in mind, the German Chancellor has urged Western powers to increase military supplies to Ukraine at a forthcoming summit in Vilnius.
Parallel arbeiten wir mit unseren G7 und EU-Partnern und der Ukraine an wirkungsvollen und langfristigen Sicherheitsgarantien. Unser Ziel dabei ist zweierlei: die Ukraine nachhaltig militärisch zu unterstützen, auch mit modernen westlichen Waffen. Und zugleich die wirtschaftliche Widerstandskraft der Ukraine in ihrem Abwehrkampf gegen die russische Aggression zu stärken.
But Russia is also suffering heavy losses. Head of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has urged Vladimir Putin to extend mobilization, something he's reluctant to do. Separately, the Kremlin rejects claims by Ukraine's President Zelensky that Russia is planning to attack the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant.
International political and business leaders are discussing reforms to the global financial system to better tackle the challenges posed by poverty and climate change. The summit in Paris is being led by French President Emmanuel Macron, who has long argued that the established financial order is outdated and fails to deal with present-day crises.
Si nous regardons les choses en face, les inégalités augmentent, la vulnérabilité climatique ajoute encore au risque et notre monde est soumis à des chocs de plus en plus grands. Nous devons assumer un choc de financement public. Face à ces défis, pauvreté, climat et biodiversité en même temps, on doit investir beaucoup plus. Et nous ne sommes pas au rendez-vous.
The summit has no mandate to make formal decisions. Climate and anti-poverty campaigners say that without taxes on fossil fuels and financial transactions, it won't achieve its goals. Neither are on the agenda.
The Bank of England raised borrowing costs by more than expected on Thursday in a move which will hit borrowers hard and spark fears the British economy is heading for recession. The half-point increase is the bank's 13th hike in a row and twice what economists predicted. Meanwhile, Turkey's central bank has nearly doubled its main interest rate in a major reversal from the unconventional economic policies originally promoted by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The bank hiked its key rate to 15% from 8.5% after it had promised to simplify and improve policies that past Erdogan governments used to try and weather Turkey's worst economic crisis since the 1990s.
Extreme heat and storms are sweeping across much of Europe, and summer has only just begun. Residents in the Hungarian town of Igabakta woke up to damaged houses and other structures after overnight storms brought down dozens of trees. The torrential rain followed several days of temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius. Further south, Slovenia has also been sweltering for several days, and police say a child died while locked in a parked car, but release no further details. And now the extreme temperatures have spread to Italy.
The first heat wave has officially hit Italy this week. Today, temperatures are expected to reach up to 40 degrees in some parts of the country. Italy's health ministry issued amber alerts covering around 13 cities, and affected areas also include major cities such as Rome, the capital where we are now, but also Bologna and Florence. On Friday, other amber alerts have been issued in other parts of the country, in Italy's south, for example, in cities such as Bari and Palermo. And the island of Sardinia is expected to be the hardest hit, with temperatures expected to rise above 40 degrees in some cases. The government's advice in this case is to try to stay indoors as much as possible during the hottest hours, but also to stay hydrated. Now, Italy is quite used to heat waves like this one. 2 years ago, the region of Sicily experienced the hottest temperatures ever recorded in Europe, and that was in August 2 years ago. But clearly, heat waves like this one have become more and more frequent as a result of the climate crisis. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.